Hey everyone, how's it going? Welcome back to another Walking Dead video. So in this one here, I want to talk about, I guess, the many character deaths that we've been getting here in the last couple of episodes of The Walking Dead Daryl Dixon Season 2, and whether or not it's too much. And it is a criticism I've been seeing a lot more online. You know, I've been talking about the last couple of weeks in terms of the pacing just being a little bit too crazy. Like, too many moments were happening too fast. And so, yeah, I do want to talk about a lot of this here, get into some of this, and whether or not they will actually make some of these changes going into season 3 and 4. So before we go any further, make sure to be a subscriber if you want to get all my Walking Dead content like this. And so the question that I have, I guess, for you is, were there too many deaths in The Walking Dead Daryl Dixon season 2? Or if you didn't think there was too many deaths, do you think that maybe it feels like that because there's only 6 episodes? And so literally within 3 episodes, like you had like what, 4 characters, 4 big characters die as well. Like, because this is a criticism I've been seeing a lot more and more. Like, I think originally I felt like this after episode 1, but I was like, you know what, in terms of Daryl's story, I think it made sense overall. And then I think that going into episode 2, I was like, okay, well, you got Carol here, and some of Daryl's story, I think, was set up properly. So I think for the first 2 episodes, I was okay with it. But I really noticed it after episode 3. Just the pacing in terms of how much happened at the nest and where they went with Carol's story, and like the fact that they were just sort of everywhere. Like, a lot happened, but it still kind of worked for the story. But I still think, you know, those first 3 episodes, I would have had that story worked out over like 4 episodes or maybe 5 episodes, right? Like something around there. But episode 4 is where you really notice it. And yes, a lot of stuff happens in episode 4, but it's not just that. It's because episode 5 as well. There is so much that happens in that episode. Like, episode 5 seems like the more calm episode of the season, but like they're everywhere. Like, they literally go to Falu's base and then eventually go to, I guess, the garage, or actually I think they're there first, like where Ash is, like with the plane, and then they leave there, go to the nightclub, and then they go and find Ash, go back to the garage, and then they're back at the nightclub again, and then there's just a bunch of stuff that's happening. Like, they're everywhere in that episode. But to focus more on the deaths, because I think that's a little bit more important to focus on. So we had Sylvie's death, obviously the first, I would say, big death of the season, right? That happened in episode 3. That wasn't too bad, because if you really look at the first 2 episodes, it's like, well, you know, there was no big character death, and in season 1 there wasn't really a lot of bigger character deaths, right? Like, you had Quinn's death, and then I think there was maybe another character I just can't remember right now, but there really wasn't a lot in season 1, so like that's fine. That was sort of a build-up season. And then in season 2, I mean, obviously you're ending an arc, so you expect a lot more character deaths, right? And so I think the way they set it up was fine, but if you just look at the character deaths that we've had now in the last 3 episodes, Sylvie's death in episode 3, again, when it first happened, it's like, all right, you know, that makes sense. It's the first real, you know, big character death, so that makes sense. Episode 4, like literally the episode after, begins with Isabel's death pretty much. Like, yes, it's not right away, but it's like 15-20 minutes in or something like that. Like, a big character. Like, Isabel is a massive character. And then later on in that episode, Janae's death happens. And again, she's also a really big character because she's the villain of the entire series so far, right? Like, she is the main villain. And so you kill off 3 big characters like that just in 2 episodes. And then you go into episode 5 and then Losang's death happens. Like, I think it's just too much. It honestly is way too much, because I just, you know, I think of like, could this have happened on The Walking Dead? Like, imagine, I don't know what arc you would have to pick, but like any arc on The Walking Dead in any season, pick like a main villain and then 2 bigger characters, and then I guess kind of another bigger character. So like, you know, during the Whisperers, like pick 2 main characters from Alexandria, the Hilltop, that would die, you know, in back-to-back episodes, basically. And then in that same episode, you would have Alpha die as well. And then the following one, you would have Beta die. Like, that's absolutely insane. And I know that sort of happened at the end of season 10 where Alpha died and then later on Beta died. But the way they set that up, like, there was such a crazy build to that throughout all of season 10. So much of this, like, Whisperer war happening and whatnot, that it made a lot of sense, right? And I still think the way that they rushed Beta's death was an issue, but that story I think was incredible. And I just really look at it overall and I'm like, I don't think this would have happened on The Walking Dead. Like, it is just way too much. There's too much stuff happening right now. And I don't know where episode 6 is going, but I just feel like there's going to be some other character deaths as well. Like, I don't know if Cadron or Falu will die. I don't think so, but still, even if the new leader of the Nest dies in this episode, like, there's just so much stuff happening right now that I don't think that any of this would have happened on The Walking Dead. And so I will say, you know, I've never wanted a lot of character deaths on the show. Like, sometimes I go back and forth on that a lot, but it's really just, you kind of have to sense where the story is. Like, if there hasn't been a bigger character death in a while, I'm like, okay, I think a character should die at some point. But if there's way too many, then I'm like, all right, this is too much. Or sometimes you kill off a bigger character like Carl and you're like, okay, that's way too much. Like, he really should still be here to this day kind of thing. But I just think in terms of the character deaths that have happened, that do the deaths make sense overall? I mean, besides Isabel's death, I guess so. Like, Sylvie's death, I guess that makes sense. You know, Madame Gené's death, yeah, I saw that coming as well. And then Losang's death, that also makes sense, I guess, with where the story was. Like, I don't really have an issue with those character deaths. I think that Isabel's was definitely something that, like, I don't know why they killed her off. Like, she really could have been such an amazing character in season 3. But this is definitely an issue overall, and it is the pacing. Like, this needs to be fixed going into season 3. I think that the 6-episode format is just something that does not work. It is a big criticism of mine, and I think that you're only going to see that a lot. Like, The Ones Who Live, that was a big issue, and again, like, you don't notice it right away because you're sort of starting the season. You watch the first couple of episodes, you're like, oh, well, this is kind of fine, but once you get to the point where you're ending arcs and all of that, and then you start to see how everything is rushed, that's where you really notice it. And with The Ones Who Live, you notice that in the very last episode. It was like, this is way too much. And the one issue with The Ones Who Live is that it sort of made the first 5 episodes feel like a classic Walking Dead story, right? Like, in terms of pacing, they just sort of told everything properly. And that's why everyone had the impression that there's no way they're ending this in one episode, and then somehow they did. Like, the finale for The Ones Who Live was absolutely rushed. It was insane. And we've had no episode so far of Daryl Dixon season 2 that has been rushed that much, but you see the pacing throughout the season. So that's why I think that 6 episodes, again, doesn't work, and it's causing a lot of the story to suffer. And there's a lot of moments I noticed in episode 5 specifically that the writing almost feels very similar to Fear the Walking Dead, which is something I don't want to say because Fear the Walking Dead I was not a fan of, right? Like, obviously I liked seasons 1, 2, 3, and 6, but 4, 5, 7, and 8, really not great seasons at all. And the seasons I'm thinking of more specifically is season 8. Like, it just feels like they're really rushing to the point a lot with the story. Like, they're just having characters appear in these locations constantly. It's like very fast. Like, this person is over here and then they have to go to this place over here. So the next scene, they're already there. Or maybe in between those scenes, you'll have another storyline happen. And then when they go back to the other story, the character's already over there. Like, the pacing is just, it's too much. And I think that's what makes the character deaths, honestly, absolutely crazy. Like, and the reason why this is an issue for me is because it's affecting the story. Like, Pouvoir, I feel like, was a disappointment. Like, I don't know how it's going to end here. We'll see. But after episode 5, it doesn't feel like Pouvoir is really a thing anymore. And I think that that group is completely gone. And I just don't like how things are being told. Like, when Carol and Daryl went back to Madame Gené's base, I don't remember what the place is called, but you literally saw everything in ruins. And I was just thinking about it in terms of, like, the details of the scene. Like, why would things be in ruin? Like, Madame Gené just died. Like, what, everyone's gonna go crazy and destroy the place immediately to, like, go and look for stuff? I know that we saw Anne take some stuff, this and that, but some of that stuff just feels way too fast. And again, those small details maybe I can just ignore or whatever, but it's just crazy to think that Pouvoir's story ended so fast. And I think that the reason why that happened is because of the direction overall with this season. I don't know if that was the intent originally from season 1. Maybe that always was the intent for the Nest to be villains, but it just, you know, that switch here in season 2 happened so fast where you almost had to tell another side to the whole story here where the Nest are also villains as well. And so you're almost telling like double the amount of story because you have 2 villains in a sense. You have the Nest, you know, they're villains. You have Pouvoir, they're villains. And then you had Carol and Ash going to France, which, you know, that's another hero story. And then you have Daryl and Isabel, and that's another hero story. And so you have all this stuff happening. In season 1, it was very simple. It was Daryl and Isabel, you know, that was the hero story. And they were going up against, I guess, Pouvoir, which was the villain story. Like, it was very simple. There was so much in season 2 here that I think it just sort of hurt the Pouvoir storyline. Like, honestly, I'm not a fan of how the arc ended, because the group seemed really, really interesting in season 1. I was really a big fan of how much power it seemed like they had, and then in season 2, it really just went away. Like, it's kind of sad to think that the second Madame Genet died, like, everything basically went away. The whole entire place was easily convinced to join the nest. Like, immediately they joined the nest. And again, pacing is an issue with that. I just look at the end of episode 4, and you see when Pouvoir decides to join the nest, and it was like Pouvoir was literally like, you know what, Madame Genet's way was not the right way, maybe your way will be the right way. And it was just so cringy to see something like that. Like, Pouvoir was supposed to be this really amazing, you know, group overall that really just kind of, it was nothing. Madame Genet really held that storyline together, and it's kind of sad to see where all of that went. Like, when you really look at The Walking Dead Daryl Dixon season 1, and you look at that very first episode where we first saw Madame Genet, and we see the scientists and whatnot, and they had that boat there, and they were talking about research with the walkers and all of that. Like, that was so amazing. That was really, honestly, so incredible, really exciting. And then in season 2, they just, I don't know, honestly, it was just really disappointing. And that's just sort of how I feel about the season overall. Like, some stuff is entertaining. Like, yes, when you're watching it, like, you're never bored, right? Like, you're never bored watching The Walking Dead right now, because there's so much happening in every episode. And maybe, you know, some people enjoy that, and that's totally fine. But for me personally, I can enjoy some moments, and I think some moments are fine, but where I have issues with the pacing is when certain moments happen, like character deaths, and it just happens so fast. And so that's why I feel like, again, that's why I asked the question, like, were there too many deaths, or was it just because of the pacing that it feels like there was too many deaths? Because it happened within 3 episodes, and I just think that, I don't know, I just hope that they do make some changes, because they've made changes in the past, right? Like, sometimes people will criticize this and that, and then all of a sudden that issue will be fixed or whatever. And so I hope that going into season 3 that we do get more episodes. I'm really, really concerned that it's only going to be 6 episodes. I do think that Dead City season 2 is gonna really benefit from being 8 episodes. Like, again, I don't know why they want to go with shorter amounts to the seasons here. I think for like season 1, it works because you're introducing the story, and there's not a lot of expectations. You're sort of introducing every element of the story for like the very first time. You're learning of, you know, I guess the setting. You're learning of every single character. Maybe you don't get into the backstories right away. There's not a lot of expectation there. You're just following one main character, meeting everyone for the first time. So it's like, again, 6 episodes of that. Yes, you have to come up with a story or whatever, but it makes sense. And that's why The Walking Dead Daryl Dixon season 1 worked really, really well. And honestly, it's my favorite season of all the spinoffs so far. But season 2, it's like, yes, so now all the stuff you set up in season 2, you actually, like, if you want to end the arc here, fine, and you want to have certain character deaths and all of that, you want to create all these moments, like, obviously you have to do that with a TV show, like, I get that, that makes a lot of sense, and you do want to watch moments like that happen, right? But you need to explain things a little bit more, you need to sort of set up a lot more of the story, and I think that what they did wrong here is, if you look at season 1, they set up Pouvoir pretty well. They didn't set up the nest really well, and the nest story ending right away is kind of insane. And also to think that they spent so much time on the nest this season when, you know, our expectations were that Pouvoir was going to be like the main villains here, which in the end, they really weren't. You know, the super walkers, that wasn't a focus really. Like, it was obviously, like, we saw the super walkers, but there was no mention of the experimentation of anything. Like, the craziest thing is that in season 1, we all focused on the fact that the super walkers were killing each other. Like, that was something that was obviously, in terms of their experimentation, went wrong, right? Like, Madame Genet wasn't expecting that. So I figured that going into season 2, we would hear something about that process, because we saw the scene in episode 4 where they were all running at the nest. And there was no mention of like how they fixed that issue. There was no talk of any of that. Like, there was nothing with the super walkers. There was no mention of anything. They just gave us a Madame Genet backstory, which I think definitely was needed. But that's just sort of my issue overall, is that I think that maybe there wasn't too many deaths, but the pacing is so fast and there's not enough episodes to tell the story that it's really hurting the story. And I feel very disappointed with the Pouvoir storyline. So I know I've been talking about the whole 6 episode thing a lot the last like 2 weeks, but it's because it is an issue for me. It really is. In terms of this season could have been way better. Like an extra episode or 2 just to focus more on, honestly, the Pouvoir storyline. I would have liked to have seen a lot more from that storyline specifically. I'm not a fan of certain story decisions in terms of the nest and all that, you know, like with where they went in episode 5 and 6, but that's fine. You can have criticisms here and there. I just feel overall disappointed that we didn't really get a full explanation on Pouvoir. And I don't know, it's kind of insane to think that the whole story is just just is done now, right? Like, it was just so fast, and the season is ending. It's not even really the main part of the story anymore. So yeah, I don't know. I'm gonna leave it here, but do I think that there were too many deaths here this season? I would say that possibly. I think for, you know, there being 6 episodes, yes, definitely way too many deaths. There was 4 big character deaths within 3 episodes, and when you look at where the characters were the entire time in those 3 episodes, how much they traveled in those 3 episodes, it's honestly insane. Like, they're everywhere. So a big criticism for me, it's definitely something that, you know, for me anyways, makes season 2 of The Walking Dead Daryl Dixon the worst season so far of all of the spinoffs. Honestly, Dead City season 2, I saw the trailer for that and I got really excited for that because, again, it's 8 episodes, but there's something about that where it feels like the story's not going to be rushed like this. Like, it does feel like there's actually a lot more thought put into the storylines there, because it's not like that insane of a story, and I don't think that the whole thing is going to be ending within 8 episodes. And that's the thing, if it does, if the whole, I don't even know, New York City storyline with the Dama and all that ends in season 2, maybe that's why they gave the story 8 episodes. I have no idea, but we'll have to wait and see. Honestly, I just hope that there is a change for season 3. There's just something that sort of tells me that it's probably not going to happen, because they are filming right now, and I don't know if they're going to be changing that last minute, but it's definitely an issue. But definitely post all your thoughts down below. Hope you all enjoyed the video, and I'll see you in the next one.